Welcome back to another episode of the Electric Election Podcast. We are live from, where are we, Conrad?
We're in Highlight Canyon, which is at the head of the Gallatin Valley, traditionally known as the Valley of the Flowers. Where we are now is traditional lands of the Kootenai, Silash, Upsaluka tribes, so this is where I go climbing.
It's amazing. So this is Conrad Anker, one of the most famous climbers of all time, but also one of the most accomplished climbers of all time, and now somebody I'm lucky enough to call a friend. We just spent a weekend and week backpacking in some of the most beautiful land in the state of Wyoming, and now we're in Bozeman, where you call home. I want to dive in right away because I wanted to ask you when we were around the fire during the backpacking trip about climate injustice, because I know it's something you've been really outspoken about. Can you talk a little bit about kind of, especially as we're sitting in a smoke-filled valley, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen from climate injustice, how it disproportionately affects low-income and minority communities, and what you think should be done about it? I think we had a great conversation about it, and I'd love to talk about it further.
Well, what we're experiencing here is a result of wildfires, and so it's been happening for thousands of years. Things are made more severe due to forest practices, a drier climate, shorter winters, warmer winters, and the forests are adjusting to that. And you get a lightning strike, and things take off, and they go there. But most of the environmental injustice that I think about is you look at the zip code, and you look at the health of the people that live in that zip code, and there's a direct correlation between proximity to pollution-emitting industries, petrochemicals, oil refining, plastics, anything that is within that. And by looking at the data from a big set, the zip codes really do correlate to proximity to pollution sources and the health of the population.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't. It's often lost in the environmental conversations because we're so focused on kind of the broader global scale of this. When you've been in developing countries and also low-income communities here in the United States, what have you seen as some of the big long-term impacts of climate injustice on these people's families and their jobs?
Within the United States, traveling to places where there is, say, a chemical plant. There's oil refineries in Billings, Montana, 2 hours east of us here. And you look at the value of the housing that surrounds it. You look at the health with that. There is a higher incidence of cancer, specifically the lower Mississippi on the Louisiana, Alabama state line as the river comes down there, known as Cancer Alley. And that's predominantly communities of color, low income, and a whole bunch of chemical plants that have been in existence for 50, 60 years that are not being updated and were just given a reprieve to not have to amend their pollutants, and they're still allowed to pollute. So there's an example of that. In Southeast Asia, specifically India and Nepal, places where I see this, a lot of the poor neighborhoods are, they settle in where land is not as valuable. So up the canyon at the Yellowstone Club, no, there's no double wide trailers. Everything's $20 million and up. But you go to the lowland, the bottom part of the basin in the Kathmandu Valley, and where the Bagmati River comes through there, and you see the proximity of the people living in there and the difficulty that they have. And so part of our challenge here is that in the United States, we regulate polluters. So if I buy a phone and the plastic case that goes into it and it's manufactured here in the United States, taking care of the full effect of that plastic is something that we regulate. When we outsource that to foreign countries, they're going to cut corners on environmental regulation to get the product in cheaper. We like cheaper product. Doesn't matter where it comes from for many consumers. They're not thinking, that's not a decision point in their purchasing prism. It's more cost rather than what is the effect of this material thing that I'm buying for the planet. So in places like the Philippines, China, that have these nascent industries in the fabric and textile industry, in the household appliances industry, there's a lot of downstream pollutants that come from everything, from the plastic that runs in our coaxial cable to the foam on the microphone. And so that when we understand the true cost of a product and its impact to society, that's something that currently we're not looking into.
So how do we, you're pretty tapped into the business community, and you have been for a long time, through the lens of environmental sustainability as kind of the face of North Face. Is there a way to incorporate that cost into business? And how can we encourage companies to stop exporting everything to these countries that have lower environmental standards?
Yeah. If you choose organic produce and organic cotton, and there's a way of making that decision, and that's is lessening the impact on the environment with that. But it's a challenge, and particularly in the last 4 years, with income disparity getting wider and people not having the upward mobility that is the American dream. Many of them are they're limited into where they can live.
Yeah, and it's pretty obvious that the environmental community knows that low-income people don't have the ability to adapt to the changing climate. They can't just move because of a natural disaster that hit their area, or bigger floods than ever before because of glacier runoff, or whatever that may be. And they also, a lot of the times, low-income communities can't support their families and also purchase sustainable products at the same time. So how do we engage better with local communities who are of low-income background and make them part of the conversation, instead of, I think a lot of times we expect people to shop sustainably or to move from these disasters and adapt. How can we engage with them when they can't do those things?
They should look at their health records. They should look at data, should consult the Center for Disease Control, and there's a correlation. And those communities, they should walk up to the door of that polluting plant and say, hey, the people that own this don't live in this community. People from our community work in here, but the side effect of it is affecting all of our lives. And that would be one way of doing it. The other way is if minimum wage was something that allowed people a little bit more, but that's, again, another big externality that we put into the macroeconomics of the United States, and how is that going to affect them. But my view on it is that we transparently, honestly, and with clarity understand the pollutants that come out of these sources, and then be responsible to hold them responsible to the communities that they're within. And this, it goes from industrial agriculture and the sewage there and the algae blooms that affect that, to the chemical plants, and that a healthier dialogue between the polluters and the people that are getting polluted upon.
And to that point, you've been a public leader in advocating for climate change reform with a big public profile, but you also live in a state like Montana, which is a Republican conservative state, and you alluded to some of the frustrations that you've had with, it's also a traditional energy state in a lot of ways, with a lot of fossil fuels too. What have been some of the biggest frustrations that you've found trying to be an advocate here? And also, where have you seen a lot of exciting direction towards a sustainable future in the state?
Yeah. So Montana is first in coal reserves and 3rd in coal production in the United States. So, and that might have changed from the last time I had that data set on there. So coal, I mean, we get these 40-car coal trains that roll out of eastern Montana and the Powder River Valley, going to Seattle and Longview and to fuel the power plants that are there. There was this plan to ship the coal all the way over to China through ports, but it was shut down primarily because of the communities in Washington and Oregon that didn't want these coal transfer ports within there. And you think about carbon that comes from coal, it's dense, it's laden, it's with mercury, toxins. We know how bad it is. And if we can take coal out of the combustion process, we're making a good step. But if you were to add transporting coal from Montana to China to run factories, we're going to get it back in 2 weeks in the winter. We'll get it back 4 weeks in the summer because of the prevailing winds. But we've also, the CO2 burden of per ton of coal has been multiplied because we're driving it across. One, it gets loaded, it gets put into the trains, gets offloaded, then gets put on a ship. And so every time you handle that, you add to the financial cost of it and the environmental cost of it. And fortunately, that was taken away. But just as Montana has opportunity in coal and the Bakken natural gas fields in eastern Montana, we have abundant sun and a tremendous amount of wind. And so for a community like Colstrip, which is built around an electric plant and coal mining, and the plants there are timed out, and the Puget Sound Energy, they're like, we don't want as much coal in our energy mix, so we're not going to be buying coal from you. And so coal generated electricity. So all of those definitely have some challenges. But when we look at the reliability of natural gas and coal, we need them to supplement wind and solar and hydro till storage systems or till technology advances that we can then work with that. And finding that balance is tricky. One last point on working locally is that within Montana, the Public Services Commission regulates the monopoly that Northwestern Energy is. And it's a 5-person conservative board that are climate deniers, and they have shut down solar, wind, and net metering. They've had lawsuits brought against them for basically doing what the energy company wants, whereas the consumer is saying we want more accountability. So coming up in the November 3rd election, the Public Services Commission has it'd be good to get more balance on that rather than 5 white conservative men that are, I mean, I've communicated with them and they're like, climate change isn't real. So
yeah, well, that lack of diversity in opinion and thought, and also just that very flawed mindset of climate change not being real is just, it's a frustrating proposition. But it seems like Montanans are starting to trend more towards demanding change in that direction. Is that right?
Yeah, there's in that energy is a mix is important. We a slightly larger population in the state of Montana than Wyoming. Wyoming's school system is funded by revenue from the fossil industry, whether it's oil or coal. So there's a much more of a connection there. But the challenges that we're facing as we change our economy from carbon to renewable, and it's going to be a gradual process, but it's one that we're all working on, is a tremendous opportunity for innovation and business. And where the media tries to point out instances like Solandra, that went belly up, and that the amount of support that the renewable energy gets is by a factor of 7 or 10 less than what the extractive industries get in terms of government support, but it's not highlighted in that manner. So one, we can say, Adam Smith, free market, we're going to let the market go at whatever it is, with no consideration for the full cost of that energy. Or we legislate market externalities into the system that then work as an encouragement or a disencouragement for various types of resources.
That's exactly the premise of this road trip, is that we're going around talking to, in a Tesla, which is a success story of sustainability, corporate sustainability, visiting with other companies and local leaders, as well as government leaders who are prioritizing not completely free market, but market-based solutions that encourage the technology and the innovation that you were talking about. Because if we want to lower emissions globally and also uplift the people most at risk from climate change, there has to be more technology and innovation to lower the cost of energy, to create jobs, to create sustainable consumer products that actually are affordable for people. And it seems like being part of North Face's team, you probably have seen that at the forefront. Can you talk a little bit about, as North Face looks towards its sustainability goals, how it's trying to look at it from that market-based, innovation-based perspective?
Good question. So we have done a deep dive into our manufacturing process. I went to Taiwan to visit fabric mills and see what the processes that go into it. And clothing and textile is the second most polluting industry in the world. I think its construction comes in first due to the cement and the packaging that everything goes in there. But there's North Face, when based in Alameda, California, adopted the series standards of sustainability for the state of California, and also came out publicly in support of the Paris Accord. Interesting note is that individual communities around the states are saying, well, okay, if the federal government isn't going to encourage us to be more energy responsible and more energy innovative, and is just going to go back to good old days, individual communities are going to take the initiative and they're going to live by the Paris protocols. And because of that, we're seeing a lessening of emissions. Same thing with the CAFE standards in automotive, where California said, we need these emissions for the health of our people in our state. And if we're going to redo the CAFE standards, vehicles that are sold in California have to abide by this. So,
and that, I think that's the power of like this local community approach, is that no matter if the federal government's doing the wrong thing or the right thing, oh, and there goes a rock.
Gravity doesn't rock!
It was a close call, but we're all good. When you look at kind of this localized community approach, you can put these steps in the right direction without having to always rely on the federal government to do things. But you've run into this problem locally where you have 5 people who kind of make the decisions on the energy side of things who aren't on the right side of history. There are a lot of people in the United States who want climate action but have that same problem. What do you think the solution or solutions are to kind of changing that and saying, okay, we can have local solutions, but not all local areas have a capability with their current predicament of politics. But here's how you can change it. How can people change that?
Your first step is look at your own energy consumption. Per capita, the citizens of the United States consume more energy than other nations. So you have 350 million people going through that level of energy. And so there's, all of us are collectively, the planet is living beyond the means our planet can support people with. So, we can't take the federal government out of it. We need leadership at the federal government. And, if you're asking me, the most obvious thing we can do is we can lose the Trump administration. It has not been an advocate for the environment, for low-income people, for people of color. I mean, get out and vote. That's my point on that. Because we have gone from the Clean Power Plan, which came in, was summarily scrapped, to the CAFE standards for vehicles, to the EPA becoming a tool of the extractive industry. I mean,
yeah, it is frustrating. And as as conservative activists, which we have a lot of conservative activists in our movement, there need to be more standing up and saying, we're part of your quote unquote base, and we should be, and you're not living up to our standards, especially as young people, to say this administration hasn't done enough for climate.
But Benji, the power is within you. You and your generation needs to change the GOP. Trump is, you can't look me in the eye and say he's good for the environment or he's good for people, and he's an amoral person, and he's roughshod over our nation, and we need to get it back. And it's not just conservative or progressives. We all need to team together, and we need to communicate more, and that's what our exercise last week was doing and what we're doing here. And that I'm excited to see conservative people that care about the environment and want to see change along those lines.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because we've had this really tough time trying to stay involved and encouraging action within this administration, but then not seeing it happen, and then not seeing it as part of a Republican Party platform. When you only have 1 out of 2 parties, major political parties, having climate change on their platform, it's hard to have a conversation like the one that we're having, where I lean more to the right of center, but it's hard to even have that conversation if the right of center isn't engaging on the national level. There are instances where conservatives are trying to engage, but when the top of the party isn't doing it, that's harder. So one final question to get away from politics for a second. You have spent decades climbing some of the most amazing places in the globe. What have you seen on climate change that has really blown your mind and made you understand the urgency of this issue?
So 3 metrics that we can look at climate change. One is atmospheric CO2, and so it's tested weekly on Mauna Kea and by a laboratory, and it's telling us what the CO2 parts per million is, and we're over 415 or something at this point. And 350.org is like, we need to have less carbon to keep a cooler planet. The other one is ocean acidification. When we take atmospheric CO2 and ocean acidification, I can't understand it. I have to trust the scientists that are telling me that the air isn't the same and it's not good for my health. And if you're not believing in science, you're going to dismiss that. But with glacial recession, you can be a pedicab cyclist in Mumbai, and you can look at a historical repeat photography of a glacier or a time-lapse photography of a glacier and watch it shrink, and it's very visual, and you can't see that. And having been in the mountains and seen what it is, and we began mountaineering 1850s, 1860s, and around that time cameras came into play. It was the turn of the previous century that some of the first images were taken from the Himalayas by Vittore Sella. And now with historical repeat photography, going back to that almost the same spot as best one can, and then snapping a picture, you can see how much it has receded. So here in the United States, Glacier National Park, the glaciers that are the namesake thereof are melting out. And I was on Rainier 2 weeks ago, and having climbed that mountain the first time when I was 16, the route that I had climbed when I was 16 doesn't exist anymore. It's like it had fallen off, and there's no ice there anymore. And so the route has been rerouted, and you look at the health of the glaciers there and how it's anemic. And so the annual layers are melting down. It gets warmer, there's more soot in the air, it changes the albedo, and you get into this positive feedback loop that's making things, the predicament of glaciers, really challenging.
So we know that there's an urgency around this issue, and that's why we're doing this road trip, to showcase these solutions at all levels of government, at all geographic regions of the United States. As we have 44 days left of this 45-day road trip, what pieces of advice do you have for us, and what do you hope we'll find?
There's I'm encouraged that you're working on conservation within your group of people and your age set, and it's commendable. I a lot of respect for that. Having dialogue with people, and hopefully what we share here is a flywheel for communication, and to look at it and to see what that is. But we're a democracy in principle, but we don't. It's not an equitable system, and the progressives face a 4 to 6% disadvantage just to get back to zero due to the Electoral College and gerrymandering. So, given that, it's a disadvantage with it. But that in doing this, that people choose their issue that they vote upon, their prism. So for some people, it might be the Second Amendment. It could be the pro-life. It could be the environment. It could be civil justice and racial justice. And everyone has something that will affect them. Some people I just want less taxes because I don't want them I want no government. It's really difficult to find what everyone wants to believe and what they base their votes on. But if it's based on the environment, look at what the candidate you're voting for and what their platform is and what they plan to do with it. And how will they? And your state, Jay Inslee. Climate change is very real for the state of Washington. He ran for president on the platform of climate change, and kudos to him for raising the conversation about climate change as being something that's a threat, but it's not a threat in the same sense that rock fell down and could hit someone in the leg. It's a threat it's distant. It's not immediate. It's not a bear jumping out of the brush to scare you. It's not someone running a red light, or it's abstract. It's out there. But where it comes down to bear is in 200 years, 7 generations. What kind of world are we leaving those generations? In our generation, mine and yours, all of us that are sitting here, we're the first generation to fully comprehend the effect of a warmer climate and climate change, global warming, and could quite possibly be the last generation to create effective change to it.
And that's exactly the purpose of this road trip, is to create that change, to show that these sorts of solutions are happening. They can happen. They can be economical. They can be cross-partisan. They can be cross-ideological. They can be cross-cultural. Yeah. They can inspire people of all different backgrounds, and they can uplift people of all different backgrounds. And if America's not leading on solving climate change, we're failing the globe and we're failing future generations. And it's up to us to make that change. And we're excited to see that there are hopeful stories, but also to push for more action. So I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with somebody who has seen so much of the impact of climate change like you have, but has also dealt with the frustrations of it from the political lens and from the business lens. And I want to thank you for your activism on the climate justice lens, to this corporate social responsibility, and then of course as an environmentalist yourself. I'm honored to have the opportunity to interview you and to have backpacked with you. And I hope we get to do it again. And I hope you get to introduce me to climbing someday. Yeah. And I'm really excited for everyone else to see this interview and join us for the rest of the Electric Election Road Trip.
Check out the Electric
Election Road Trip.
Yeah, EERT.
Yeah.
So there we go. So, and hopefully that the power structure of the GOP will listen to you and say, yeah, we need to address climate, and it needs to be part of our platform. It can't be something that's not there, and that it's something we're all investing in, and it is economic opportunity. As we transition from a carbon to a renewable economy, there's opportunity for business to thrive.
Exactly, and that's a cross-partisan idea. It's something that shouldn't be Republican or Democrat, but we need both sides of the table to do it, and we're going to be continually spreading that message for the next 2 months. So appreciate you joining us, Conrad, and to our listeners and to our viewers, looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Electric Election Podcast. Thanks for joining us.